Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. First of all, we have, just to be clear about everything, everybody, thank you for listening to the show, but we're both on vacation, Sona and I both. And we may have some audio issues here, but we're going to try our best to get this episode out, considering it is this penultimate episode of the DTF St. Louis, which is what we'll be covering here today. And of course, not of course, but so everybody's aware that the podcast, these particular episodes of the show become very popular. So I assume there'll be some interest in our coverage here. Joining me, as I mentioned, for this conversation is Sona. Sona, how's your vacation going?
So far, so good. I think we've picked the single worst weather stretch that this area of Florida has ever had, but here we are. We're making the best of it.
It's very cloudy here, but we have not gotten any rain. What's the weather like over there? You guys are actually not that far away from us. Surprising that there's so much variability in the weather.
We got in a full Universal Studios day, and then about, I would say, 2 hours after we got back to the hotel, the skies opened up and it's been pouring ever since.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, we have not gotten any of that rain. We've gotten a lot of clouds, but actually I was able
Mhm.
to walk around and very little precipitation, luckily here. Unfortunately, we had to cancel our plans. We had a couple of good days, and then we had to cancel our plans today because my daughter was sick all night long
I'm so
and
sorry to hear that.
is still recovering. And hopefully,
Poor
this is
thing.
not a serious thing. I was just actually just sitting with her right now. So I think she's getting better. So we'll see how it
Fingers
all goes.
crossed.
I am not having dinner with the rest of the babysitting her, of course, to make sure she's okay. But I'll have dinner delivered shortly, and then I'll take a break from this, and we'll go have some dinner once the food gets here.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna interject to say, fathers don't babysit their own children. You're just spending time with your daughter.
Correct. That's a good point. Very good point. Well, then why are they paying me for this? No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, I didn't know that part.
I only do it for the cash.
You know what? When a kid is sick with a stomach bug, probably the parent that has to stay with them should get paid.
The only thing that pays me less, but perhaps, is doing this podcast.
Yeah, that's like a hazard pay type situation.
Yeah, and hopefully this is not a contagious thing. We were worried this might be like the flu, and the GI symptoms were just something related to that. And they were like, "Oh man, like is it kind of like be like neurovirus or something?" And but
Oh,
anyway, but her fever has broken. And she seems
yay.
better. So I
Great.
think hopefully it's just a passing thing.
I hope so.
All right. So this week's episode of DTF St. Louis, the penultimate episode, like I mentioned, six of seven episodes, sixth of the seventh episodes for this one and only season. I presume this will not be an ongoing thing. Is called The Denny's Plan. And like so much of this show, maybe again, keep saying this every episode, one of the saddest episodes of the show, maybe the saddest, and yet also a setup, honestly, for a very, very funny, preposterous conspiracy going on here to try to make this Denny's plan work, which is very funny. But for me, I think a little convoluted. And I do wonder, Son, if you agree with me on this, despite the fact that there is some good character stuff here and some very funny bits, some of the funniest bits in the show's ever had. And yet, I feel like with the penultimate episode and so many unanswered questions, this really did feel like they were biding their time for the finale, which is an interesting place
Mm.
to have a filler episode this close to the end. What'd you think about it in general?
Well, I know last week we said, oh, this episode was kind of a downer. And then when we talked about
Yes.
it, there were so many funny moments. I'm not sure I found that many funny moments in this week's episode. Maybe that'll change once we start to talk about it. But I found this week more depressing than last week.
Yes, I agree that this is maybe the saddest I felt for Floyd in this whole entire circumstance. And again, kind of reinforcing my overall theory of what might be to come,
Right.
which is
Sure.
pretty depressing. Although at the same time, and we'll talk about this, maybe speculate on what could be some possible scenarios here. They are still playing out multiple scenarios here, possibly as far as the murder mystery has actually become more central to the plot, which I'm surprised that it has really become more of a murder mystery show. But simultaneously, so much is still unknowable and unknown, of course. But I'm in equal balance between this. The every indicator here is that this is Floyd at the end of his rope, and more overtly, explicitly said by the show. And simultaneously, I'm like, we still have not had that Emmy's POV episode, which cannot happen. I just do
Mhm.
not believe that that is not going to happen before this thing is over.
I
And so
don't
those two,
know. I mean, there's one episode left, right?
that's what I mean. But I mean,
What are
are
we
we
gonna
on?
do? The whole last episode is from her perspective? I don't know about that.
I mean, I almost, but don't you feel like we have to see her perspective just for the fact that, like, how could you have this whole entire thing happening? And it's not like, well, we're only going to see Clark's POV. We don't care about her POV. She could have been purely in the background, just like, oh, he has a wife and things haven't worked out, and she's completely off the agenda of the show. And that could be a version of the show for sure. But the fact that she has been there, in the background, just popping up here and there, and so unspoken of, really feels like she is the neglected wife and is going to be central to the wrap up of the show. Maybe I'm misreading this whole entire thing, but I really do feel that that has to be inevitable at this point.
I hope you're right.
But I do,
I just
to
don't
your
know where
point,
the space is at this point.
I completely agree. To your point, exactly. It's simultaneously just my gut instinct is that it's impossible that they can go this far without having any addressing it at all in any way. And yet I am starting to feel a little concerned that that might be the case because, like, how much runway is left? There's really not
Yes,
much left here. So,
exactly.
okay. But central to this episode is, this show has been a little convoluted and a little, kind of making scenarios that we don't fully buy into. But there's, you know what? But before we get to that, really, I think intentionally setting up something just ultra silly to set up a very funny set piece, which is like kind of trying to set up this bizarre date that Clark is trying to set up, but also
Yes.
as a way to kind of hand wave away aspects of the storyline, like to, I think, clean things away and still leave that door open. And we can parse all that out in just a moment. But before that, we want to talk about maybe the saddest moment in this entire show, which is that opening scene where we're kind of seeing the role reversal, right? They're in the hotel and Clark is, now the
Mhm.
voyeur, and the Carol really showing Carol in the most negative light possible. And if there is a theory that Carol has been trying to have it both ways, playing the doting wife and simultaneously pushing him and pushing Floyd. This seems to be the most damning piece of evidence here. Not only that, there's realistically, she may be uncomfortable. She may be at the end of her rope. There's a lot of frustrations in the relationship. But the way that she's really cruel to him and then very callous afterwards, very cold, was really showed her in maybe the worst light we've seen in the show.
I agree.
And this is a terrible moment, right? Like, I mean, unless you want to, what you want to
Oh,
add.
it was so uncomfortable to watch. It's one of those things where you have that, I can't remember, but there's a German expression for it. I think of that
Schadenfreude.
embarrassment. Isn't Schadenfreude where you feel it takes
That's giving
pleasure in
pleasure.
someone
Yeah,
else's?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like it's that secondhand embarrassment of like,
Mhm.
you just feel so cringy just to even witness it.
Yeah, and I felt absolutely terrible for Floyd, and also the fact that honestly, like, the show has done a really good job of setting up what we expect it to be is a heel turn here in a positive way. This, that there's going to be some complexity to the way things played out, but there was this very positive moment at the end of last episode where they kind of come together in this new form of this relationship. And it's really just devastating to see how it just did not go at all for Floyd the way he wanted to. And by the way, over and over again in this episode, just like his perception of himself, even like this shred of interest that he got from this app that even in this really bizarre way is still feeding his ego in a positive way in, at least a little bit. Even that gets deflated. And of course,
Mhm.
even Clark in this bizarre scheme trying to make this thing come true, even that when the reveal is, happens in the
Mhm.
park, it's absolutely devastating. You can only imagine how horrible this is for his ego at this moment.
Yes.
Here's where the show is a little convoluted and overly so, I think, in my opinion, is this whole situation of him being like, oh, and by the way, I speculated on this just last week. We were talking about that. My theory of the whole entire thing is exactly this, like replaying those scenes in my mind, now knowing all the pieces of the puzzle that are on the board, that when you see earlier in the season that Clark was like pressuring him, like, "Oh, take a look," and then he gets the hit from the match or whatever with this tiger profile, and then of course he's the one who. And now that we know all that,
Mhm.
it's like, oh, I even speculated that maybe he was just doing it to like boost his ego, considering how deflated he had been. So that's exactly what it turns out to be. But where things get really convoluted is where he suddenly starts to be like, well, I want to go through with it, and just to not only to go through with it, to hang out and like to get this little ego boost and not have just
Mhm.
kind of like at least like just a friendly meeting like he had with the modern love character, but now to be like she wants an actual sexual response here to give him an ego boost, which this is where this scenario is like so overly complicated, overly complex. Because theoretically, you can imagine he's just like, you pay somebody to be an actor to have coffee with this guy and then be done with it. But his solution to try to get someone who may actually have this response is to go to like the only place at Denny's in a predominantly gay neighborhood to find somebody who, and then he just starts soliciting the first person he sees there. So this
Mhm.
is this is the part that I thought was a very funny set piece. Is just the idea of him trying to awkwardly introduce the topic with this person who's just the waiter at his Denny's, and this is the best he can do.
Yeah, I agree that this was funny, but it wasn't laugh out loud funny kind of thing for me.
Mhm, mhm.
But yes, the idea of like, I have a friend who likes coffee. Do you like coffee? What is the item that takes the longest to prepare? And the waiter saying, that's what you want. You want the thing that takes the longest.
That's what you want. He's like
It's
so
a
surprised
very
by this.
strange request. So yeah, I do see the humor in all of that. I also come back to Jason Bateman. We're at the penultimate episode. I'm still calling him Jason Bateman, but his original premise that the problem with his wife is that they don't spend enough time together, but he has time to drive
Yes.
to this random Denny's and hang out there all afternoon. But okay.
Well, he was there for a conference, but yes, it's there's
Oh, I
still
missed
it's
that. Thank you.
yeah,
Okay, I missed
yeah.
that.
So he did have 2 days in this window of time to hang out at the Denny's and try to find somebody. But of course, the biggest comic payoff of all this, first, I love that the waiter, when he started to explain, like, "Could you find attractive possibly?" And the waiter's very philosophical about this, being like, "Well, attraction's a very complicated thing."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, I can't just fully negotiate this in this conversation alone." But I thought that was pretty funny. And then, of course, he walks away after like a completely botched job, like not even clear as to what he was asking for. It's like pretty. And then, he's offering $900, by the way. And then some random guy was sitting behind him. It's like, I'll do it.
Hmm.
That was maybe the only, like, that was, I mean, there's quite a few other funny things about this. It's like not only the fact that basically the whole scheme and how it can compounding and getting worse and worse until it has a really tragic punchline, unfortunately. But the fact that not only does this guy accept it and he just happens to be there, and that the whole preposterousness of that in a funny way, but then that he decides to scope it out. So he like goes there a day earlier to tail him from the train station, and then like eavesdrops on them, and then to get a look at Floyd early on. Unfortunate. And of course, Floyd knows the sign language. And of course, the fact that he uses the Knicks sign language. What do you think about that?
You know what? That's actually a gesture that, for whatever reason, I have adopted in the last few months. So it didn't seem strange to me, but it probably is strange in a vacuum.
That's what made me laugh actually about that part of it, is that it's so funny that it is the combination of the fact that they can sign to each other, but then the guy actually uses the hand motion,
Right.
which is the correct hand motion, and then the fact that he said next. He said next. What does that mean? And
Yes.
then like he's signing it, basically breaking his heart from a distance again by using sign language. So all of that was clever, but I felt like the setup to that was preposterous. Is my personal opinion. But
Yeah, I don't disagree.
yeah, so it was a little bit awkward, and like I feel like of all the episodes, this was the one that was the most awkwardly plotted to try to come to that resolution, which I thought was a pretty strange situation there. What did you think here? Do you think this is, maybe I'm being overly conspiratorial, Do you think there is some aspect to this mystery here that modern love could still be involved in some way? In the fact that, I predicted that we're going to have somebody unexpectedly use that terminology, right? Everybody looks normal
Mhm.
from the other side of the street. And then this guy says it. But in passing, he also mentions, like, oh, by the way, I did join that app and I
Yep.
met somebody. And we met at a, what is it, at a roller rink and we had some sensory play. I don't even know what that
Sensory
means.
play. I don't
Sensory play at
know
the roller
because
rink.
my association with sensory play is for small children, where it's
Right.
like, here's a sensory bin, splash around in some water with some trucks. I don't know.
Yeah. Or like the touch tunnels and stuff they have when you go to the museums.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, he's still in the picture, still tied into this in some ways, still very active on this website. Apparently, he meets up with everybody on there. Might be a very small pool of people on that actual website.
Maybe.
So, do you think that that ends the? I mean, what do you think of the whole point of having this here? For me, I think that just trying to clean up the plot because, like, they've been teasing the fact that, well, maybe something was going on via the Tiger profile between the two of these guys.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
then we even saw, like, in a flashback, there was a moment where he's hugging him and his shirt's off, and you're like, oh, well, when did that happen? Did it happen in the hotel room, maybe before Linda Carlini's character Carol showed up? And but it turns out no, it's like this completely innocuous thing where he's like working out with his shirt off, and then they hug. So it's like they are trying to clean that up to remove like most of the suspects off the board to focus us in on what the end game might be, and even to the point of the actual police detectives saying overtly, like, "Oh, so he didn't meet up with Tiger at the pool house. So who went to the pool house that day?" And then we literally hear the knock on the door, which is, of course, the night of the death or the morning of the death. And of course, that's the mystery that's remained. So it feels like they just wanted to like kind of clean up these plot points and like take some theories off the table, and not the most elegant way to do this, to be honest. Like kind of a very roundabout way to almost feel like, well, how are we going to do this all in one episode? And honestly, I didn't think the episode did enough to fill things out. Other than that, other than kind of just excusing away some of the things we've seen up until this point.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you that it came across as a way to clean up the plot, and that sometimes they do that with something that's very neat and clever, and
Yeah.
you think, "Oh, what a perfectly logical explanation." This was,
Yes.
like, very convoluted.
Well, I mean, in I mean that the defense of it, because I mean, it's the whole show has kind of been written this way. Many of the scenarios that have been explained away are pretty preposterous. It's almost like the theme of the show. This one was for me, for some reason, just knowing all the characters, this was like a bridge too far. Even like I bought into the whole like, oh my God, he's he's spying on them inside the closet. And then they explained that. And that actually had for me a really solid payoff last week, right? So this one just seemed like a little like kind of like hand wavy, like, okay, we gotta wrap this up. We gotta wrap this up. So some of this stuff, some of these storylines have to go away. So it felt
Yeah.
a little rushed and unclean at very best. Like I said, this has been messy by design, but I thought that was a little too hand wavy for me. And honestly, other than that, in some of the other episodes, some of these things like who has the bike and whatever has all been explained, and like these breadcrumbs have been laid out, and I think they've done it pretty elegantly and have made all those things pay off in some way. And
Mhm.
here, I feel like this was just cauterizing storylines and getting them off the table. But I could be wrong. Maybe there is more to this, and I just haven't seen the payoff yet. So we'll see. But to that point, if that's the case, to our initial point at the beginning of the conversation, if that turns out to be the case, that is way too much to bring this back into the
Mhm.
fold and make Carol the primary suspect and do some element of investigation and show us whoever the real perpetrator is, show their POV episode. I'm like, that's all going to happen next week. That's way too much stuff to happen in one
Too
week.
late in the game.
I agree. I agree. But maybe they have a great finale. I'm very hopeful that they can surprise me with a very neat and appropriate. It doesn't have to be neat because this is not a neat show, but an appropriate finale.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I mean, so much of this speaking to the fact that there's not that much complexity. This is probably going to be a pretty recap episode for us, conveniently, because it's not the best time for us to be recording anyway. But there is so much little else that is presented here in the episode, right? Like we see very little of Farrell other than that really flattering moment early on in the episode. And what else do we see? We spent some time with the investigators. What did you think of Richard Jenkins? What's his Homer, the Homer detective deciding to Google Indiana Jones
Oh my goodness. You could tell it was paining him just to type it in.
in the middle of a restaurant? Not the right time to be
Mhm.
Googling that. By the way, like what are his settings on his Google search? Like,
Well, hopefully it's not set to come up as images.
no, right? Can you imagine just a bunch of
A
just like
whole page.
panorama of all those images, which we saw some pretty crazy ones in
Yes.
previous episodes. Hopefully, it doesn't get the same results page. And what else do we find out? We also find out that Detective Plum, we know that her and her husband have been doing some sexual experimentation. They're very open minded. Apparently, they've had tried to have sex underwater as well. And it wasn't what they expected.
Yeah, I could see that.
Is delivering me some food and she's waving.
Oh,
So maybe we could spend some time here. Is there anything else they want to shout out? Actually, before we move on, I was going to just say like maybe we could just lay out what are any possible scenarios here at the end of who the suspect could be. And surprised that the show is honestly wanting us to do all the speculating here late in the game. But was there anything else in the episode that you wanted to shout out that I might have missed?
well, there was a throwaway line when Carol is talking with her umpire boss,
Oh,
where
yeah.
she
Mhm.
says she cannot go to the restaurant after because she has to pick up a dumb bike for her son.
Right. Yes. Good point. Yes, the sun comes back into the
And
picture here.
so then that makes you wonder, of
Mhm.
course, about what's going on with the son and the bike, because that is one person we have not yet seen on the bike.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And also is on my suspect list. Again, underdeveloped for sure, but that is definitely a possibility on my suspect list for
Yeah,
sure.
I had taken him off my list, but now I don't know.
But before we get into like any possible murder suspects, let's just talk about what is so utterly depressing about this episode is that we see Floyd really at the end of his rope. Obviously, he
Yeah.
has his body image issues, just his overall confidence. We see that he's lost his job, his usual gusto for his actual job.
Yep. Which he loved.
Yeah. And an interesting parallel, by the way, that we've seen over and over again that Clark is this very successful person financially, at least seems to be very financially successful because he is a minor celebrity. But he says, like, who watches the news, the weather anymore?
Uh-huh.
Everybody just gets it from their phones,
Yeah.
and it parallels what we've been saying here multiple times. We were wrong, by the way. We've gotten commentary from people that there definitely are these signing folks, but you
Right.
have to assume that whether it's at a concert, whether it's at a live event, whether it's closed captioning on even live events, closed captioning on live events. We discussed this briefly on a podcast previously. Used to be terrible. You could tell that someone was typing
Yes,
and would
literally
type
typing it.
things
Yes.
exactly. People would mistype
Backspace,
things.
backspace. Yes.
They would they would be talking about somebody who's like a famous person, and they would start typing like a word, and then realize, oh no, they're talking about a person, and then
Yeah.
delete and then type a person's
Yeah.
name in. So it was like a human being listening and transcribing in real time, and usually like way behind. Like if you're watching a debate, like
Right.
way behind, like sentences behind what's
Right.
actually happening. Or a baseball game, I used to watch like the Mets, and if you had the closed captioning on, in case you were watching and doing something else at the same time, they would be like you would get the like who hit the home run, and you could actually wait
Yeah.
because
Right.
transcription would come a minute later.
Catch
than you
up.
actually-
Yeah.
exactly. And but the technology now is nearly instantaneous, of course. So again, these two men are in very different levels, even the strata of their economic strata, etc. But at the same time, feel like they are losing their livelihood, their identity in this thing that has defined them in a large extent. And you get the feeling that Clark was good at being a weatherman too, right? Like he was a celebrity for being so. So what do you make of that? And by the way, that's a good question. Like, let me circle back all the way to we see this in the credits every single week that apparently Clark had like some kind of nervous breakdown and shouted out "Beware" and did like karate moves.
Yeah.
And
That's
this
what I should have mentioned right away. Yeah.
when and this is something that the show's been doing, and for me, most of the timeline of the events we've seen have been continuously reshuffled. But when did that happen? It seems seeing it without any of his narration to the police officers who are interrogating him again, it seems that that is something that happened very like towards the end, like when he was getting really stressed out. But then he
Hmm.
recontextualizes that and saying,
Yes.
"Oh, you probably know me. I'm the guy who did that thing," which apparently happened all the way at the beginning of the story. That he basically
Right.
did that, and then soon thereafter, like that weekend, perhaps met these folks,
Yes.
including, of course, Carol.
Yes.
So he's already falling apart before all of this happens. So
Yeah, because it sounded like someone who was having a medical episode, but then it seems like it was not a physical health episode, but some sort of mental health episode.
oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So he's having some kind of crisis of conscience, maybe not financially, like I can't support my family, but just being like, what am I doing with my life? Like my this thing that he is famous for is like going the way of the dodo, right? Like it's
Yeah.
like so many of us, by the way.
Mhm.
Like, like we're not coding anymore now. We're just managing AI chatbots. That's
Uh-huh.
personally for my own career. So it's like
Mhm.
you have these your fundamental things that define us, right, are changing, right? And I guess that happens in midlife period. And that's what's happening here with these two guys. So there is this interesting paralleling of those two things. I mean, in a way, believe it or not, what Floyd does is actually way more useful, even in the
Mhm.
modern day, than being a weatherman, right? Which is entertaining, of course, and everybody's very curious about the weather and always wants to see the weather forecast. But like they mentioned, I can just pull my phone out at any moment of the day and know what the weather's going to be for the next few hours. I do not have to tune into the show at night, which, by the way, used to be the exact opposite, right? Many people would watch the news, the local news, just for the weather and sports. That's
Mhm.
it, right? And you can
Mhm.
see the scores at any moment of the day, and you can see the weather at
Yep.
any moment of the day, and like that is completely different now. And
Yep.
and then you have Floyd, who again we have all these different technologies that can transcribe, but in the moment, being there present, physically there with somebody who, for example, the boy last week who couldn't see or hear, you need a person there, right, who can do that. So it still has some value. So it's a crisis for all these men. But Carol continues to be, if not the person, the perpetrator themselves, then like an orchestrator of all this.
Mhm.
Okay, so with that out of the way, let's do our suspect corner here, our theorizing.
Wait, I have one other tangent, which
Yes,
is
do.
that after we talked about the music in the show, I started paying more attention to it.
Yeah.
And I definitely saw the theme that you had picked up on yourself,
Yeah.
which is that a lot of the songs are weather related and a lot of the time about sun and things being sunny. And then sometimes
Mhm.
there's stuff being rainy. But I did notice in this episode, because it is one of my favorite songs of all time, they used the zombies. This will be our year, which is
Oh, I
not any of those things.
two the two things that I love that. First of all, I love that you call that out. Second of all, I love that song also. Not their most famous song by a long shot, by the way. So pretty obscure zombie song. And I did not know that about you, Sona. I'm so glad that you like that song. Yeah, I love that song. I do
I
too.
keep you guessing.
And there was another song that they played here too. Again, that thematically was not. I think it was. I had to Shazam it. I think it was called "Down to Zero" by Jill Armatrade. I don't know how to pronounce her name, but not the also not weather related.
Weird to depart from that when they had committed to it so fully.
And this will be our year. And interesting. That's the zombie song, of
Yeah.
course, which is great. And but interesting. Yeah, I mean, thematically it ties in, obviously, right? That this is like these guys were like maybe they thought this was going to be this moment for them to like reclaim their youth or something, some redefinition of themselves, and it has not worked out at all. So that very ironic song. But yeah, not weather related for sure. And now I have to go back and look at all the tracks that were used. I'm sure there's a playlist out there to check out on and to see if there's any other kind of outliers. But my early on, specifically when I was tracking this much more closely, everything was like weather related. And then we very much went from even last week, there was another rain song.
Yeah, no, I had noticed that you were definitely onto something there.
So yeah, they're messing with us. We'll see if they get back on track or if they go in a different thematic direction. Curious to see how that plays out next week.
So having said that, now go ahead with the suspects.
And then you maybe think of something else that I forgot to mention, but
Okay.
I can't remember it now, but maybe it'll come back to me when we get through the suspect list. Because it was funny. I preparing for this conversation, I'm like, well, it has to be this person or this person. Or it could still be this person or this person.
Can't rule that
And
person
then I
out.
was just like,
Yeah.
okay, we got a lot of it's still a lot of people that are here. But mostly because we haven't seen enough, to be honest. So it's kind of cheating a little bit. But Carol, of course, right? Carol has to definitely be the perpetrator. Maybe she's the one who puts the final nail in the coffin. I am extremely it's so obvious a choice that I
Right.
don't believe it to be the case. But it is obviously the one that they have actually built a case against. They've also, of course, initially very early on made Clark look incredibly guilty, but as this has progressed, it's become pretty clear that
That's
he's
the
not
one
the
person we
perpetrator.
know it's not.
That is definitely not exactly. And of course, even to just directly reference here, there was the whole question that even when he still looked innocent, there was the whole question of, hold on a second, you made this meeting with Tiger, and
Mhm.
then you're Tiger, and then that whole thing. And then, of course, with this week, where it's saying that that conversation existed, but just like the previous text message, which was misunderstood in this particular scenario, that is a conversation that happened, but that was broken. And Floyd was completely aware that date had been broken. So my question for you, Floyd still goes to the swimming
Mhm.
pool, but the date, quote unquote, date has been broken. So my scenarios of the case: one, he invited somebody there because he just works out there in the morning. That's his actual routine.
Mhm.
So he could just be there anyway, and it just happened to be the same location. Scenario two is that he changed it to meet with somebody else. And if that's the case, who did he change it to meet? Do you have any theories?
And thinking about this, and the only person that comes to mind that seems workable here is Modern Love.
I thought the same thing. I'm thinking that it's possible that he somehow we didn't see it, but they did
Right.
exchange numbers or something. So there was some communication. The show has done that, by the way, before
Well, they could
too.
still be connected on the app.
Well, they would have seen the app communications, right? So the last
True.
communication he has
Okay,
is
true.
with Tiger. He didn't have any more communications with Modern Love, but the show has set us up in that way where early on the investigators were saying like, and then Carol, their original theory was Carol and Clark were not hooking up anymore. She broke it off, and then they didn't communicate after that point. But apparently they weren't texting, but they were still meeting up with each other, right? So the text conversation didn't represent that they, as a matter of fact, if anything, the relationship accelerated at that point. So it is possible that maybe he had Modern Love's phone number or something. Maybe he exchanged his actual number, and Floyd has communicated with him in the past, or maybe never communicated with him, but then said, hey, that's somebody I met with before. I'll reach out to him and see what he's up to.
Maybe he went to the roller rink to find him.
Good point as well. It's possible that that would be some of what's revealed next week. So yes, again, that is possible. And just the fact that they brought in the connection to Modern Love once again this week made me think once again that it might be tied
Mhm.
in. And once again, and like we've said this already, but you don't necessarily cast this actor for such a small role potentially.
Right.
So Carol, we kind of jumped ahead to maybe Modern Love, which and I'm still open to the fact that maybe Modern Love did make this rendezvous, but cannot be the actual perpetrator because I don't see his motivation, to be honest,
I agree.
unless he's somehow connected to Carol Love. Which
Right.
we still have like that. What is going on with that big name?
Yeah, why are they so insistent on constantly using it even when they were in bed together in this episode? Floyd is calling Carol Love.
And then, of course, Clark's wife, which again, I cannot believe that they would not have give us some perspective, her perspective by the end of the show. But maybe we'll have to wait and see. But she's definitely on my list. Two more suspects. One, of course, could be Rich. It could be Floyd's son, right? Who maybe found out. Carol's son, I should say. Yes, both of theirs. But the fact that he could be upset about discovering this, he may have been following them, might understand what's going on, and confronted his dad about this. Stepdad.
Yeah, because Jason Bateman, I'm just going to call him Jason Bateman to the end of this at this point. Never mind Clark. Makes the point that he didn't want to share all of this with the
Yes.
detectives
Yeah.
because it would be hard for Richard. So
Exactly.
it kind of brings in that idea that Richard would not do well. I mean, what child would with the reality of all of this? But Richard also has these specific additional issues.
And there's also the conversation that Carol had with Richard earlier, where he's saying, like, things are so much worse now. And she's like, I'm always going to protect you. So maybe she's protecting him. Like, maybe there was something that happened. It could, I mean, it may not even been like an intentional murder. It could have been just
Right.
An altercation that took
Sure.
place, and he had a heart attack. So, and then she's trying to protect him because she knows he was there. And of course, we also have that mention that the bike had been repaired for her son. So,
Right.
meaning that perhaps Floyd was not riding the bike anymore, but maybe the son was or wanted to.
Right.
And of course, my preferred theory of the case that horribly, tragically, Floyd went there to do this to himself.
Right.
And where did that dose come from? He wanted it. He got it from Clark. Clark gave it to him. He has plausible deniability. It could all be an accident. And they could still collect the insurance money.
Mm-hmm.
And
Or
this is
Or Jason Bateman's wife finally snapped and somehow showed up at this Kevin Klein pools in the middle of the night, early morning hours, and did this. I don't know.
yeah, I mean, she's still on the my suspect list too. We could like there is a very plausible episode of the show where she's been spying on them. She's been looking at the credit card information all the time. She's popping in. They go like, "What are you doing tonight, honey? What are you doing here? What are you doing?" And he's just like, "Oh, I'm doing this." And she's like, "Oh, great, great, thanks a lot." And but actually has been snooping, like looking at his computer, looking at his history, and knows exactly some really weird stuff is going on. Like, what is up with this insurance policy? What is up with these charges? What is up with his, him being on this profile, this app, and has been snooping and followed him one day when he's always busy, never has time to hang out with her, and followed him to the hotel, for example, and she wants to put an end to this.
Right.
And again, that could be an accidental. It still could be that she's there to confront Floyd about what is going on, and it could still be an accident. But one thing is clear. This is a very sad turn of events for everybody.
Yes.
A couple of things I want to briefly bring up is a couple of people reached out. And by the way, almost everybody who's reached out with their own theory thinks that Emmy is the perpetrator. And they think that Carol's way too obvious. And they picked up on all the things the show has been doing. Like, why do she's out of focus. We don't see her that frequently, etc. Right. So what is going on? There is a fourth person in this square of relationships, this configuration, and is the fourth leg of this stool is not represented at all. And inevitably there has to be, or not. I mean, it's very late in the going, but I do agree with that theory that there's got to be more to this character. And the other thing I was going to bring up is I haven't brought this up before, but I have tried to watch this show. I didn't quite get into it. And maybe now that I've seen this show, I need to give it another shot. The creator of this show did a show which is available on Amazon Prime called Patriot. And it's about a guy who goes undercover, like as a working Joe at at a company, and basically gets recruited to be a spy in this agency. And there might be a conspiracy, there might not be a conspiracy. And it also has a very oddball tone that I've only seen the first few episodes, and I've had multiple people to me, even in my personal life, in my friends group, recommend the show to me years ago. And I couldn't get into it. And now that we've been covering this show, multiple listeners have reached out to us and like, did you ever watch this first show, Patriot? You gotta watch that show. You gotta watch that show. So I'm like, okay, maybe. I will finally hunker down and watch Patriot. I think it only lasted 2 seasons, and they were short seasons.
Hmm.
So, and I think it was a British production, although this is not a British creator on the show. But I do want to mention that Patriot, if you like the tone of this, you might like the tone of that as well. All right, son, I think that is the rundown of most of what happened. And we'll be back next week to
That's right.
get the final verdict on the whole season. And hopefully this audio isn't too bad. And thanks everybody for listening. And we will be recording other things later this week. And you'll hear some coverage of the pits and your friends and neighbors. That one's probably going to be a little bit later, but we'll definitely get around to those as well. Euphoria is coming back. I'll be back at home and I'll be able to manage all these recording sessions more clearly. And I think that's about it. All right. Enjoy the rest of your vacation. So I think you'll be back home by the time we record your friends and neighbors.
Yeah.
So we will touch base again later in the week.
Sounds good. Hope you all stay healthy over there.
I'm going to try, but hopefully this thing's not infectious. We'll
Keep
try our
washing your
best.
hands. Keep washing your hands.
Exactly. All right. Thank you. Thanks again. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.